Okay, here we go. I'm gonna see if I can finish out this series today, and if I don't, no big deal. I mean, if it breaks, if I break the slab or break one of these, no big deal. I'll keep the video. I'll show whatever. Okay, so I'm a little bit behind in my work for the auction. I was working on some side projects and stuff. All right, just gonna make sure I don't drop anything on top of my auction items. All right, let's see. So in this series, I started with this one here. Got this shape. I figured I could make 3 points out of that slab I broke up. The second one came out a little bit different in shape than the first one. So we'll see what the third one looks like. And I want to make a matched set. So what I'll do is I just tone everything down to the smallest and most lightweight piece when I'm making a set. Now, did they do that back in the day? In the old days, I think they did that to some extent, but they didn't have to match them exactly. These are at little dart points. So there's a pretty good range of weights that'll work as far as the, let's see, what do they call it? The tolerance for the weight. There's a large tolerance. The atlatl darts can tolerate different atlatl dart point weights without messing up the flight at short range, which is usually what you're shooting with an atlatl dart. You're not shooting extremely long ranges unless you're shooting to hit something by chance, like shooting an atlatl dart into a herd of bison or something, just to see what you can hit. But I don't think hunting was done in that way. I think it was pretty deliberate, where it was short ranges within confined areas, like within an arroyo or some other box canyon type situation, or maybe even constructed fencing of some sort with palisades, logs stuck into the ground to create a wall, and just herd the animals into that, scare them into the pen or something and then shoot them. A lot of them will jump out, of course, if it's a large group. It's hard to contain everybody, but you can shoot a few. All right, so close range, the tolerances are pretty lenient for atlatl dart points. So I don't think they were made to match exactly when you were making a set. But they came pretty close, because if you look at the artifacts, the real ones, there are amazing similarities in types, right? So they were obviously using a pattern, either memorized in their mind or physical patterns, which would be actual points. If you didn't have any points in your possession, you would go, hey, can I borrow one of yours for a second? I need to look at the proportions and stuff. Sure. So you get one of these from a buddy or something, and you'll kind of measure your spalls, and from there you can make your preforms, and you can hang on to that point. Hang on to the buddy's point for a while until you finish your first one, or you can give it back and keep swapping back and forth and use it whenever you need it. Or the tribe could have a stockpile of points. You can just go into the stockpile, take a look, take one out, and get the dimensions off of it. Not that you would write them down, but you would just maybe trace onto a piece of leather the general shape or whatever. And then from there you could make your points. sit down and make a bunch. It's more efficient that way. That way you can get all your tools together and not worry about some of them being lost for the next go around, and then have to make some more tools, or maybe the dog ate your antler. Now you got to go out and look for more antler. So you don't want to make them one at a time. You just get all your tools together all at once while you're in camp, or when it's a nice weather, a particular season with nice weather. Sit down and make a bunch of points at the same time. Okay, that's what I'm thinking. So that's why I'm doing this series, to show the process of making a match set. I know a lot of the nappers on YouTube do 1 point at a time, and everyone gets used to the idea of everything being a one-off. They'll make a Clovis, and then they'll make a Dalton, and then they'll make a Scalhorn point or some other thing from another completely different time period. Just make one of each, or maybe 2 or 3. Just they'll break the first 2, and then the third one will be good. But that's about it. They stop at that, and then they go on to something else. They don't have the old mindset where you just have 1 or 2 types, maybe 3 types of points, and that's it. You have a knife blade, you have an atlatl dart point, type A for big game, type B for hunting, not for hunting, but for warfare, type A for hunting, big game, and type B for warfare, and your knife. That's it. I think that was the usual. The knife could be a simple biface. Doesn't have to be fancy. Although I think some of the cultures made fancy knives, or ceremonial knives. Maybe there's a type D, fancy ceremonial knife, not just a regular bifacial blade, but something with some religious significance in the shape or the material, or maybe even decorated. Not very many sources go into possible decorations on some of these blades. Like some of the Aztec blades have side profiles where there's an eye and some teeth on the blade used for sacrifices to represent the god of whichever deity they're sacrificing to, or something similar. There's not much reference on decorating these blades, and I haven't gone into that either. I have very few actual examples of decorated blades except for the Aztec stuff and maybe the Maya. There's a bunch of eccentrics in Central America also, where you can see the side profile of a warrior on this side, another side profile, another warrior on the other side, and various other shapes like the headdresses of these warriors or priests or whatever. In the eccentrics, those are kind of cool. Those might be one-offs. I don't think they made exact duplicates of those each time. But for these, for atlatl dart points, I think they would make sets, not just one at a time. You can keep the shape consistent. You can keep your tools handy. Or when you gather your tools, you're not going to be scrambling or scrounging for the tools the next time you sit down and try to make a point. Got everything available right at that time you're making the points. Okay. So if you're not doing it that way, if you're a napper that does a one-off each time you nap and you're thinking that's the way they used to do it, yeah, they probably did, but most of the time I think they were doing this in sets. Okay. That was for you guys just now tuning in. Those of you who've been following the series already know all that stuff. Okay. As far as my opinion goes, it's just my opinion. So what I did just now is remove the square edge. The way I nap slabs is pretty random percussion flaking, indirect percussion. Excuse me while I fiddle with the camera. Indirect percussion on the edges. This is a steel rod you can get at Lowe's or Home Depot or wherever, whatever hardware store you have. I think this is 12 inches long or 14 inches, 3/8 diameter. And I just put it behind my knee. Some guys can't do it that way, so just strap it on top of your leg somehow. It works the same way. I hold it behind my knee because it's simple. I'm able to do it. I have no problems. And I came up with that idea a long time ago out of frustration. I wasn't able to get the kind of flaking I needed with direct percussion or with the indirect percussion methods that were being used at the time, like rocker punches. Rocker punches work really well, but I broke mine. Unbeknownst to me, I was trying to nap rock that was almost impossible to nap, so I was hitting the rock extremely hard with the rocker punch and broke the rocker punch. And I said, this is not good. You know, I spent a lot of time making this little rocker punch. I hate making tools or jigs. So what am I going to do? I want to give up and make bone points. Or I can put this piece of antler I had from the rocker punch behind my knee. It was barely sticking out. I said, you know what? I can just hold it like this. Let's see if it works. And voila, it works. Started with the abo. Natural materials, like all these gung-ho flint napper newbies. It has to be natural materials, man, because how else you gonna learn? You're not gonna learn with metals, man. You don't learn nothing. Yeah, well, you can learn to do the napping with natural materials. But part of the learning, I guess, would be, did they do these as one-offs or did they make sets? You know, did they make a set of, like 3, 4, 5 completed ones at a time, during that particular week or the season, or what do they do? I think they stocked up in the summertime when the weather was good. You didn't have to worry about the rock freezing up or the ground being frozen. You can't dig up your stash of bifaces. In the summertime you can dig up your stash of bifaces and you can sit around pretty much any time of day and nap. You can go away from camp where these flakes are not going to be flying into someone's dinner. You don't have to worry about having a fire. In other words, you don't have to be around the hearth. In wintertime, everyone's huddled around the fire. And no, they didn't have separate fires for everybody because that uses up too much wood. You got one fire, basically, per family unit. You don't want to be sitting around napping in wintertime with that little fire going, getting chips into everyone's eyes and food and bedding. Because you're sleeping right there next to the fire too, right? I think the way they used to do it was they'd build a little lodge or out of skins or stones or wood or whatever, right? Sod, maybe some tree bark, maybe debris. They built a lodge of some sort during wintertime. And they would sleep in there too, as well as do their other work. And their feet would be next to the fire and their heads would be away from the fire, right? I think that's how they used to sleep. I think there might be evidence of that. Which makes sense because you don't want the fire to pop all of a sudden, have an ember go into your hair, and wake up with a flaming hair. That wouldn't be any fun. Anyway. And of course, the carbon monoxide. I don't think you want to have your face too close to the fire because of the carbon monoxide. But your feet, definitely. If you know anything about winter, the feet are the first things to get and stay cold. Especially when you're sleeping. My goodness. How do I know this? I've been basically living the van life for several months now. And I know how cold the feet can get. I got a space heater for my van. I'm in the back of my van and I have a space heater for when I sleep in here to turn it on. I'm in Vermont now. Temperatures get down pretty low. I think this week we're going to see a 1 degree Fahrenheit temperature coming up soon. We got about 6 to 8 inches of snow on the ground right now. And I'm trying to imagine what it'd be like to nap outside or in a lodge with a little fire going. Everybody else trying to huddle around and stay warm. And here I am chipping with indirect percussion methods, chips flying everywhere. No. And of course, down by your feet, all these flakes. Nope, I don't think so. I think a lot of the napping occurred in the warm season, where you can go off by yourself or with another group of guys and sit out there and nap in an area where there's not much traffic. Okay. And you know, you don't have to build a fire in the summertime to use up all the wood. All right, so I got a biface here, right? It's way too big. I'm kind of not wanting to reduce this down. I'm thinking maybe I should make something else out of it, because it'd be kind of a waste to trim all that off. So what I'm going to do is, I changed my mind. I'm not going to use this. I'm going to make these as similar as possible. Right? Change of course. I'm going to use this for something else because I don't want to waste the material. This is expensive stuff. This Hornstone. This stuff, anyway, these really good slabs that I got. What is Hornstone? That's funny you should ask. I wasn't even thinking about that. No, Hornstone is naturally heat treated. It's exposed to heat. It's a metamorphic rock. Starts out as a chert, right? As a sedimentary rock, but through natural processes. Maybe a lava flow nearby heats up the ground, or maybe because of pressure from surface layers of rocks above it. Heated the stone naturally, and now it's a natural heat treat. It's probably my favorite stone of all to work, is this naturally heat treated stuff. And no, it doesn't respond to heat. If you try to heat treat this, it doesn't do anything to it. Which is kind of cool also, because if you're hafting this and you're using a lot of glue and you're heating it up next to the fire, and let's say you got it stuck into a big old knife handle and you got a lot of goop, a lot of pitch or glue or asphaltum on this, and you're heating it up a lot, it's not going to damage the blade or the biface or the point because it's already been exposed to heat. It's not true with other materials. If you nap something raw, right? Let's see. All you guys looking at raw stuff. Yeah, it was all raw, man. This is raw right here. This will be available in the auction. Very difficult to work, right? It started out as a large chunk. Now this is a raw piece of chert. it's consistent, right? So it's pretty good quality stuff. It's just very difficult to run long flakes, as you can probably see. Now, I need to haft this onto something. Right? I mean, it's not going to be used. You can hang it from your neck, I suppose, and use it without hafting. But hafting allows a lot of options for you. As you can use it as a weapon if it's longer. You can stick it onto the end of a spear if it's got a haft, a stick, a foreshaft. They call it a foreshaft, right? If you have a foreshaft attached to this, you can stick it on the end of a spear. You can hold it as a knife. You can use it as a butchering tool with less fatigue because you're not trying to hold a little area back here. You got a big old handle. Well, maybe not thick, but long enough. All right, so anyway, hafting is important. Now, if you're using a raw piece of stone, heating it up next to the fire to put the goo on here, because it's a hot melt usually, the pitch glue or the asphaltum glue, the usual waterproof stuff is heat melted or heat pliable. A raw stone will react to the heat, right? And if you heat just the base, what happens to the tip up here? Not heated, right? What happens when you have inconsistencies in the material from the stem up to the tip? Well, larger chance of snapping, both in the time period where you're hafting it, also in the time where you're using it. So it doesn't make much sense to use predominantly raw material for hafting if you're using a hot melt adhesive, because you're going to get a lot of times an effect on the raw stone. Now, you could wrap it with sinew and hide glue. Hide glue is a water-based glue which is extremely strong. It will stick to stone. You can haft it with hide glue and not worry about that. But what do you need to make hide glue? You need a container to boil down the bones, the sinews, whatever you're using, the skins, to make the hide glue. It takes hours and hours of boiling down to make a thick paste or a thick goo for the hide glue. So most hide glues were used after the invention of pottery. Well, you can make birch bark containers, man. Yeah, that's regional. What did they use down in Central America? Okay, so those of you who are stuck, like I was stuck in the raw stone mode where everything should be made of raw stone. Natural tools, raw stone, yeah. No. In my opinion, raw stone has many disadvantages. It has many advantages, like it's a durable, very durable. You drop this, it's not going to break as easily as a heat treat or as a hornstone, which is a natural heat treat. That is true. But you don't need to put notches on something like that. If you're just going to use it as a blade, don't notch it. All right, just use it as a blade. Maybe wrap the bottom part. But if you are notching it and stuff and it looks like this, you are hafting it. Now I can see there's a logical explanation or logical justification for saying that the raw stone is used for blades without the hafting configuration at the stem. Okay, very good point. But many of these points have the hafting configurations on the stems and they're being heated. And if you heat something raw, it's going to affect it. In many cases, especially with these church in Texas, they will change drastically at 300 degrees. And it's not very difficult to get it to 300 degrees over a fire. And they had to have known this, because it resharpens differently. If you got the bottom here heat treated and the top not, and you're resharpening, you're going to go, wait a second, this down here is easier to chip than this up here. And I keep getting snaps across there. I think I'm going to put two and two together and say them, because I'm heating it, it's affecting the stone. So let me heat it ahead of time so that it affects it so that the heat already affects the whole thing, and then make something out of it. That way I don't have to worry about it later. Okay, enough of that little rant. Let's see if I can get these to match in thickness and in overall shape. The first one is too thick, so for you guys that are gonna cringe at this or hate this part, you can look away. Look away. Alright, so I'm going to do some pressure flaking on this to start to see how that goes. I've been doing more pressure flaking in the past month than I have in the past 5 years. And I can feel it on my wrist, but I'm going to deal with it. I'm going to learn to pressure flake in series, sequential pressure flaking. See if I can get some good videos up for you guys doing sequential flaking. Because we all know that if you can do sequential flaking, your knowledge of artifacts increases, right? Just like staying at the Holiday Inn overnight, or whatever it's called. If you can do sequential flaking, all of a sudden your knowledge of artifacts in general and everything related to primitive skills increases, right? Yeah, that's what it seems like. If you can do sequential flaking, you are the man. You are knowledgeable. Well, maybe you're knowledgeable in the sequential flaking and knowledgeable about how much painkillers you had to take during that process to get over the soreness until you finally made the adjustment and increased your strength and altered your musculature to deal with heavy pressure for hours, literally hours on end, like I did on some of my stuff I've been doing recently. Heavy pressure flaking for hours on end changes your musculature. But hey, that increases your knowledge of artifacts. This changes in musculature and this muscle memory will, right? Expand your knowledge of artifacts and general primitive skill technology. So funny. People say, you're not an expert until you can do sequential flaking. And I'm not making fun of the accent. I'm just kind of changing my voice. No, you don't learn anything from sequential flaking other than how to do sequential flaking. Why was it done in the past? I think it was done for several reasons. One, it conserves material to some extent. If you're doing pressure flaking, mainly sequential pressure flaking, yes, it's very time consuming, but you're not going to break your pieces because you're not shocking the piece as much as you would with percussion. So it does save material, I will admit. I've been doing it a lot lately. It does save on material. You really can. Once you get your muscle memory going and your actual physical muscles tuned up and toned up, and you can do some really nice flaking with pressure, and you don't even have to think about it, and you're really not shocking the piece. It's a nice thing, but it doesn't increase your overall knowledge of primitive skills. It's just, that's a very specific skill. It doesn't increase your knowledge of artifacts. It doesn't mean you know how exactly they did it. There are many tools and many methods involved in pressure flaking. Well, how many can there be? Well, name the different natural materials that can be used to make tips on pressure flakers. Antler, bone, and horn, that's 3. But I have a stone pressure flaker too. Really? Oh yes, made of rhyolite. And you can also make pressure flakers from wood. Really? Oh yes. I got a pressure flaker made of live oak, which is probably the only wood that I would use for a pressure flaker. It doesn't work that great, but it can work in a pinch. You got nothing else. Your dog just ate your pressure flaker. You go, dang it, give me that piece of wood out of the fire. Yeah, okay. I'll use this for now. But it's going to look crude, man. Your arrowhead's going to look crude. You mean like some of the ones we see in the archaeological record? Yep. So anyway, I'm going to do a lot more pressure flaking just to show you guys that I have been doing it. But I will not claim to have any extra special knowledge just because I can do it. Or I will not support the idea of you saying, oh, now you're the expert, man. No. Okay, so I'm going to continue with this. Let's see. Should I do another one in this series? I think I'm going to wrap this series up because I think you get the idea. What I'm going to be doing is just... it's 31 minutes. What I'm going to be doing is just thinning this down to match this. And then I'll be done. And I already know who I'm shipping these to. These are gone. Spoken for. I'll do a little short section of a video on how these turned out. I need to make this base or this stem smaller to match this one, and this blade thinner to match this one. All right, but that's it for now on this video. Okay.